Hello and welcome to ConTinual. My name is Jean Marie Ward, and I'll be your host tonight as we discuss fan fiction and the development of craft with five wonderful authors: Alledria Hurt, Amy Ravenel, Nancy Dunne, Nancy Northcott, and Seanan McGuire. Welcome, everyone. Not everybody is familiar with everybody's writing, so I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves, please, and maybe if you like, tell us about your introduction to fan fiction. Nancy Dunne.
Well, I am what I call a multi-genre fantasy writer. Most of my stuff is in the epic fantasy, sword and sorcery, dragons, magic, that sort of arena. And actually, I was very, very inspired to start writing my first trilogy by a lot of gaming that I did back in the day. I played a lot of EverQuest, a lot. And I just started writing down the little adventures that my group and I had and thought they might make nice stories and put them away. And then later came back to them and was like, yeah, if I can work that into another universe. So fan fiction, I'm not one of those authors that's like, oh God, fan fiction. Because I really see that it does have a place in moderation, especially in fantasy writing. So,
okay.
Is that what you asked me?
Well, I also asked for an intro of you and who you write, but...
Oh, well, I'm Nancy. We figured that. I write fantasy novels. I live in South Carolina. My day job is as a sign language interpreter working at a university. And you may or may not see my Irish wolfhounds or my husband walk through. So that's me.
Okay. As long as he's not under 18, we're good.
No, well, yeah. I mean...
Alledria, could you tell folks a little bit about you and your introduction to fan fiction and what you write and that sort of stuff?
He's under the age of 18. What? Okay, so hi, my name's Alledria Hurt, and I am I hop genres like a frog on a hot rock. That's pretty much the deal. And my early introduction to fan fiction was actually started with the X-Men in the early 2000s.
Okay. Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Ravenel, and I write the Restless Spirit series for Falstaff Books. It's what my publisher likes to call cozy goth or cozy horror, which is basically, there are some horror elements, but it's in a cozy way. Kind of. It's like a cozy mystery with ghosts, pretty much. Okay. As far as my introduction for fan fiction, picture it, the late 90s. And I fell into Highlander fan fiction as a young college student and just went from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was my intro, really. I mean, I'd heard about Star Trek fanfic. I think we've all encountered that in our early days. But yeah, what got me was Highlander and the Boards. Yeah. Nancy Northcott, please introduce yourself, your writing, and tell us about your introduction to fan fiction.
Okay, as Jean Marie said, I'm Nancy Northcott. I write the Boar King's Honor historical fantasy trilogy, which will conclude this spring for Falstaff Books, and the forthcoming Merlin Club historical fantasy mystery series, also for them. I independently publish a couple of subgenres of romance, and with Jeannie Adams, I write the Outcast Station science fiction series. I'm also the comics track director for ConTinual, and that ties directly into my fan fiction experience. There used to be these things, they're still around, but they're not as big as they were because of the internet, called amateur press alliances. And they're kind of like chain letters for grown-ups. And you send in the required copy count for everybody to have one and a few to have extras, commenting on what other people have said on comic books, on comic book themed movies, whatever. I mean, I don't think they're limited to comic books, but my experience was. And the one that I happened to join was dedicated to DC Comics' Legion of Superheroes. And so I started writing fan fiction as a participant in that Amateur Press Alliance, or APA, and discovered that I liked it, and I got really good feedback on it. And eventually a couple of people said, you should write something that you could actually legally sell. because of course the Legion of Superheroes is copyright and trademark DC Comics. So that's when I kind of got started on writing my own things, and I continued to write fan fiction for several years, but I haven't done it lately.
Okay. Seanan, could you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and your wonderful collaborator there, and also your introduction to fan fiction?
This is Kelpie. She is a 14-week-old Maine Coon. So, she is a representative of the largest breed of domestic cat in the world. They are the North American landrace breed. They developed when domestic cats, we think Angoras, escaped into the woods of Maine and proceeded to do their own thing while not dying through brutal winters for quite some time. And a landrace is a distinct breed with distinct and identifiable attributes that has developed without human intervention. So the Maine Coon just went off into the woods of Maine and made itself. And when they came out, they were so odd looking compared to every other cat that we had access to that people wrote their own fanfic about them. The name comes from the fact that people were reasonably sure that Maine Coons were the result of tabby barn cats going out into the woods and doing the bing bang with raccoons, because they had these fantastically long stripy tails that didn't look like anything we'd seen on a cat before, but looked very much like something that we had seen on a raccoon. So this is, like I said, this is Kelpie. Now this is a 12-week-old kitten. Look at how big it is.
I thought she was a cat.
No, this is a baby, and she is going to be a monster. So I'm Seanan McGuire. What I do is I write books to feed Maine Coons, because I have 3 of them, which is currently, she's about 7 pounds right now because she's tiny. Thomas, my oldest, is 28 pounds, and Elsie, who is very diminutive for a female, is 19 pounds. So we're thinking Kelpie here will be in the 20-25 pound range when she's done. So that's about 60 pounds of cat that likes to sleep on top of me at night. And so I write books to keep them fed. And that's useful. Mostly I write urban fantasy. I am also Mira Grant, and as Mira Grant, I have very much enjoyed the current global panini, because Mira writes biomedical science fiction about horrible diseases and the public health responses thereof. So this has been fun. I'm having a great time. My introduction to fanfic really was, I started writing my own when I was about 3 and had no idea what that meant. I just really, really liked My Little Pony and Doctor Who and wanted to have adventures with My Little Ponies and Doctor Who. And then when I hit high school, I discovered my first ongoing fanzine, which was called Dreamberry Jam. It was an ElfQuest fanzine edited by Arlene Harris. And like I think the majority of us, I was the smartest kid in my high school. That is just about the science fiction author experience, is that we were all the smartest kid in our school, which is why college was hell for so very many of us, because suddenly we weren't the smartest kid anymore and we didn't know how to deal with it. But as the smartest kid in my school, my teachers had no time for me. I had never been edited. I had never had someone say, this sentence is in the passive voice, or you have too many qualifiers here, because I was doing okay without the editing. And Dreamberry Jam, as a paper fanzine with an editor, was printed, and Arlene did pay for the paper. So when I turned in my first story, she gave it back to me looking like a crime scene. Just red ink and crossouts everywhere, and I fell in love with him pretty much on the spot. Fanfic is where you go to have people actually edit you, even when you're the smartest kid in the room.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, let's go on to the next thing. So you were doing fanfic before you were doing original fiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And so it was a training ground and a development. What made you decide to make the leap from working in somebody else's playground, if you will, to writing your own original fiction?
I wanted to be Ray Bradbury. He had a TV show, and I found out that all of those episodes were stories he had written. And okay, seriously, I need my hands back at some point. I cannot mute. There are other people who need to talk, but I can't mute because I can't reach anything but you. Can I have my hands? Will someone come over here and get this kitten, please?
I would, but I live in North Carolina.
Okay, well, that's going to be a problem for both of us.
It will.
Basically, I always wanted to tell my own original stories, but for a very long time, I felt like I wasn't allowed Like that was such a big and important thing that there had to be some kind of rule saying you couldn't do it. And since pretty much all of the big and original stories that I found that were the kind of story I wanted to tell were written by men, I really did believe that there was some sort of rule I would be breaking. And I was a very rule-abiding child. It wasn't until I hit around 12 that I figured out no one would come to my house with a brick if I broke a rule, and started breaking rules gleefully, and still have, in fact, reams of that connected printer paper that came out of the dot matrix printers in boxes downstairs with the novels I was writing in middle school. They are not good. They are not good. However, I keep them because on my death, they will go to the archives of the University of California, Berkeley, and someone will write their thesis on them.
And you will make someone's career.
And my
this
ghost
is a good
think this is the funniest thing that has ever happened. I am setting up my own entertainment in the afterlife.
Hey, we've got to, we've got to do this sort of thing. Alledria, basically, what made you decide to, did you start writing fan fiction before you were writing original fiction, or, vice versa?
Here's how the spectrum of my life started. When we started writing, I started writing as a child. I fell in love with text-based role play, ended up running from text-based role play into fan fiction, and then on a dare wrote my first novel.
And was it influenced by your fandoms?
Actually, no. My first novel is actually my first published novel, which is Chains of Fate, and it was the first novel that I wrote that I was like, my friend D.E. Morris literally dared me to do NaNoWriMo one year.
Mm-hmm.
I had never heard of it. I didn't know it existed. So she's in 2005, she's like, hey, I bet you could write a book. So I looked at her and I was like, are you serious? And she's like, yeah, I'm serious. You can do this. So I sat there for the November of 2005 and I wrote a book.
Mm-hmm.
I started out in chat rooms, Cheetah Chat, Yahoo groups, AIM, all the old spaces that some of which don't exist anymore, which were just like, wow, what am I dating myself? Maybe a little bit.
Yeah, well, I was dating myself, and to a lesser extent, Amy was with Highlander, so it's good. It's good. Nancy Northcott, you mentioned that you started writing in those that newsletter, if you will, the Amateur Press Association. You had started in fanfic and then you transitioned to original fic, or had you done any original fic beforehand?
I had tried some original fiction beforehand, one novel, and I got to the middle and didn't know what to do. So I had not heard the adage, when you get to the middle and don't know what to do, blow something up. So I didn't know what to do. And fan fiction for me was much easier, and it was a source of pretty quick positive feedback. And so when people started saying, you should write something that's yours, that you can put out there, I started thinking, well, maybe I should give that a try. And I kind of wanted to see whether I could do it. And like Seanan, I have that first book I finished, and I looked at it at one point and thought, you not only sent this out for people to read, you asked them to give you money for it. But I keep it because I wrote it, and I think it's good for me to look back on it sometimes. But did you ask about influences, or did I misunderstand?
No, not yet.
Okay, all right, then I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Amy, basically, how did you get from writing fan fiction to writing original fiction, or were you doing it both together? How'd it go?
Well, I wrote original stuff when I was a kid. Just silly little stories. I used to have notebooks and notebooks and notebooks full of them. I was not the smartest kid in school. I was smart, but lazy. I just wasn't interested. But I was more interested in making up stories. I found fan fiction through a Highlander email list, and I kind of fell in that way. And from there, I started writing a bunch of stories for a bunch of different fandoms. At one point, I did write some stories for Moulin Rouge, and that's where I met my two best friends, Alexandra Christian and S.H. Roddy. And through them, I met my husband. So fan fiction has given me quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah, my goodness, my goodness.
But from there, I started thinking about an original story idea and wondering if I could actually do it. So I figured, why the heck not? So I gave it a try. And it took me a few years, working on it off and on, till I finally, got up the guts to actually send it anywhere. But I just kind of rolled that way.
Okay. Nancy Dunne, basically, what got you from fan fiction to original fic, or were you doing them simultaneously?
I did write a little bit of original fic before I started putting down the little stories from the online game, and that was about my dogs. And I still have this series of books written about my greyhounds and my Irish wolfhounds, told from their perspective. But that's all I had done, and that was really only marketable at niche events. Like, you go to a regular convention with a book about a wolfhound, and everybody's like, "What?" So it really started. I can beat all of you, I bet, because I was doing the chat-based stuff on Prodigy. That's how old I am. And started getting some of the ideas from there. But then probably 10 years later was when I started with EverQuest. And that's when it really became a thing that I would write down the little stories. And in the end, I had this I used to call it my super ginormous manuscript. That was the name of the document in my computer. And it was just sitting there and it couldn't do anything. And so I took it as a writing challenge using NaNoWriMo, because NaNoWriMo, I will preach that gospel all day long. I started taking the bare bones of those stories and those characters and using them as just kind of inspiration for a whole new universe and a whole new set of characters, and nothing that even, it probably does still resemble the game just a little bit if you're a really old school, nerdy EverQuest person like me. But that's what really gave me the confidence. Once I had all those notes and I transferred them over to another universe, then I was like, well, that's not so bad. And after that, everything that's come after that trilogy has been completely original and has nothing to do with any of those notes. So I sort of see that as a badge of honor that I was not, if you can take a bunch of notes and make it into a novel, cool. If you can then go on and write stuff that is still based on the world you created, but nothing to do with those notes, then I think my mother would be proud. She probably would still bleed all over it in red ink. She was an English teacher, but she would be proud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wesley Chu's first books were all edited by his father, who was a professor of English. I can't imagine a worse torment myself.
I'm okay with handing Wesley a few small, relatively harmless torments. The last time he and I were in the same place, we were on a panel together about writing licensed tie-in fiction, or as I like to call it, fanfic for money with an editor. And he took the microphone for the introductions as the last person there and goes, "I'm Wesley Chu. And I've written 13 full-length novels." And just looks incredibly smugly at the room. And I'm like, don't invite me to your party if you don't want me to play. I'm Seanan McGuire and I've written 74. So he deserves the occasional relativly non-murderous torment. I think
not non-fatal. Yeah.
Like I wouldn't sit in front of Nora Roberts and go, "I've written 74. She'd eat my kidneys. Know your genre, know who you're trying to flex on, and maybe don't just randomly flex on people. It's not polite."
Yeah. Well, yes. Meanwhile, you made a very good question while we were discussing all this: chat rooms, mushes, or muds? Anybody want to start that conversation?
Well, I remember Cheetah Chat fairly well, and Cheetah Chat was. I remember being overwhelmed by the number of options that you could do with the fonts. And I was just like, okay, I need black text on a white screen. And if you can write and string together some sentences, we can get along. But a lot of one of my worst things about text RP was the fact that so many people, you could write a paragraph, you'd get 3 sentences back, and I'm just like, I'm gonna murder you in your sleep.
See, I always tried to not judge on that because I type when I am not in the zone at about 180 words per minute. And so I would give you a paragraph while maintaining a reasonable speed of role play. But I had a friend, Gwyd, who was severely dyslexic and still a really fabulous player. And for them to write that paragraph would be 20 minutes. I don't want to wait 20 minutes before I can pose again. So if you're a slow typer or whatever, as long as I feel like you're present and invested in the scene, I'm fine getting a sentence back for my paragraph. It's just a matter of kind of knowing who you're playing with. I really, chat-based games taught us all to type a lot really fast. Not necessarily to type a lot of good really fast, but to type a lot really fast, and that has its own power.
I used to be able to use that alt and then the numbers, and I could give you any characters you wanted. It didn't always make sense, and it made my stuff, I could just imagine people going, what? When I would send stuff, but I could do it quickly anyway.
Yeah, part of why I'm really good at writing in the present tense is too much time spent on mushes, because past tense in active RP is oppressive to your partner. Past tense tells the person that you're playing with, you have no control over what happens in this scene. I have already made all the decisions. So you had to learn to kind of do that present tense and embrace it. But
old school God moding.
Yep. I've discovered so many people that are also writers that I knew when I was 15 because we were playing on the same World of Darkness mushes. Half of the similarities people have pointed out between my work and Jim Butcher's come from the fact that we both played on Legacies and Dark Secrets for 5 years. And when we started writing, we both harvested the shit we thought was cool.
Yep.
It's not me ripping off Jim or Jim ripping off me. It's both of us ripping off a sociology major from Tennessee who really liked Volkswagens.
Oh my goodness, yes. Well, Volkswagens, no, I won't go there. Anyway, Nancy Northcott, any thoughts on this?
I don't know what those are. So I have no thoughts on them other than I don't know what they are. So I'll learn about it from everyone else's discussion. Thank you.
Okay, multiplayer role-playing games, I believe, is the basis of it. And don't ask me to explain what the acronyms mean, but if anybody can jump in with that,
go
right ahead.
Is a multi-user dungeon. A MUD is a multi-user dungeon. A mush is a multi-user shared hallucination. And I don't remember what muck stands for, which is tragic because I spent so much time on furry muck as a teenager. But they each basically described what the operating system was because they each had a different code base. MUDs were more like playing a straight up RPG, like playing the old Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy RPG or a D&D game. You would have more commands that you could just type in and it would feed back text. You didn't always need another human to play on a MUD. A mush, on the other hand, the shared hallucination part came from the fact that if Alledria and I were both playing on the same mush, I would make my werewolf and Alledria would make a change vampire or whatever. And we would have stored descriptions of our character that the other could see by typing L and the character name. And then we would pose at one another to have an interactive role play scene rather than letting the environment do it for us.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. Amy, did you engage in the games as well? And
no, I actually don't role play. I know it's a black mark. I get it. But
Well,
but my fan fiction foray was email with mailing lists, of course, and of course live journal, where you could do thickathons and all sorts of different challenges where somebody would like request a fic, or there would be like one prompt and everybody would write to that prompt, that kind of stuff.
okay. Well, I think this question everybody can play in, and thanks to Nancy Northcott for part of it. Amy, what was the biggest thing you learned from fanfic, or the biggest benefit you got from fanfic? And what was the thing that fanfic did not teach you?
The biggest benefit for me was developing characters and learning how to write dialogue. Those were my biggest benefits. The one thing I didn't learn, and it took me a while to learn, was how to actually plot a story. I could write a one shot or a quick scene or anything really well, but plotting a full story was beyond me at the time. So that one it took me a while to learn, but I did not learn that from fanfic.
Okay. Nancy Northcott, same question. What was the biggest benefit, the biggest thing you learned from fan fiction, and also the most important thing you didn't?
I would agree with writing character, because you're writing characters all the people who are reading are familiar with. And if you don't hit the notes right, they're going to tell you about it. And pacing. And at the time that I actually started seriously submitting, I was writing a multi-part Batman family fanfic. And we used to print them in 8-point type, 2 columns to a page to save money, because when you're making 60 copies of everything, it gets pricey. And my husband came into the room and he looked at it. And this was, I was on part 4 or 5. I don't remember. And he said, if you put this in standard manuscript format, about how long would it be? And I said, well, one of these pages is probably about 4 manuscript pages. And he said, and you're up to page what? And I thought, well, I don't know. I guess it'd be around 300, 350. And he went, tell me again why you can't write a novel? And it was really a light bulb moment, because I had another novel in progress. And once again, I had reached the middle and I didn't know what to do. And then I looked at that story and I thought, this story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I knew what to do. So it was just the problem of it being my own creation that was the roadblock. But the thing that I did not absorb from it, and you could, if you set out to do it, I just didn't, is learn world building, because you're playing in a world, at least in comic book fanfic, that everybody who's reading it already knows. So you don't have to explain to them what the Batcave looks like. They know about the Tyrannosaurus Rex and the giant penny and the turntable for the Batmobile and all the computers. You don't have to explain to them about the Legion of Superheroes clubhouse and how they get back and forth to the future, because everybody reading it knows. And so if I did a do-over, I would pay more attention to that part of it.
Okay. Seanan, what was fan fiction's greatest gift to you? Or it might be the editing that you mentioned earlier. And what, how did it play into the development of your actual fiction? And then what did it not teach you? What's the thing that you didn't learn from it that you had to learn someplace else?
So as Nancy said, one of the greatest, Nancy Northcott specifically, because we have a collection tonight, one of the best things that I got from fanfic was you don't have to learn how to establish character. All you have to do is know the same characters everyone else does, and they can fill in the gaps. It's what makes AUs so easy and beautifully flexible in fanfic. And that's one of my favorite things to do these days, is the hard AU, where things just...
What's an AU? Okay.
Alternate universe.
Okay.
I'm going to write the Legion of Superheroes, but much like Mark Waid essentially created a complete reboot when he brought his in and they were new versions of the people we knew and loved, my Legion of Superheroes is going to be set in 2009 California, and they are all going to be Earth kids, and we're going to do this. And finding the way to thread that line between the universe you have established and the universe that people already know is really, really difficult and really, really fun. Buffy the Vampire Slayer AUs were kind of my bread and butter for a long time. But I would also do weird stuff like a Josie and the Pussycats Veronica Mars crossover, where the main thing you had to accept as the alternate universe was that since they were all teen sleuths, Josie and the Pussycats, of course, existed in the Veronica Mars universe. And Lily had been a huge fan before she died, you know, that sort of thing. And trying to reconcile these non-contiguous concepts. Fanfic taught me how to be flexible with my ideas of what made a character and to arrow in on what about a character mattered. It also taught me how to be edited and how to be criticized in a way that I had never been. I was an extraordinarily weird child. Everyone is very shocked when I say that sort of thing because I'm so normal now. But I was an extraordinarily weird child. So in school, I either got zero criticism because I was too smart to criticize and the other kids needed the teacher's attention more, or I got a constant barrage of abuse because I was the weird kid. I never got anything in that middle band. And in fan fiction, you would get reader results almost instantly. You would get people commenting within 20 minutes of posting a chapter. And so you got that feedback, and not all of it was good. I still remember the person who came onto one of my live journal fics and said, "This isn't shit. This is what would happen if you ate shit and then shat it out again." And I was just like, thank you. If I can take that, I can handle anything. But what fanfic did not teach me and did not prepare me for was how incredibly mean people can get once money is involved. You know, I thought I had been yelled at and criticized for everything. I have had people, because they paid for the book and thus they feel I owe them, send me just the nastiest, most pointed emails about how dare you do this? How dare you do that? How dare you make this mistake or cross this line? I had heard you were a relatively open-minded author, but I bought a book that was published in 2009 and you used a word that we didn't openly start discussing as ableist until 2016. And how dare you not always have been perfect? And like, there's a reason you actually will not find my fanfic under my name anymore. And it's not because I'm ashamed of it. And it's not because I don't want to be associated with it. It's because people started reviewing my fan fiction as if it were professionally published and edited fiction that they had paid for. And that is not the point of fan fiction. That's not why we do it. That's not what makes it fun. That isn't to say fanfic is this perfect magical world that never gets criticized. But if you're coming in and going, I can't believe I read 15,000 words and found 3 typos, and then calling me a nasty name and demanding your money back, like, this feels performative. And also, I kind of want to come to your house and put wasps in your car. So I just disassociated all my fanfic from my name to make that stop. So fanfic, I thought, had prepared me for how people would be about the stuff I write. It did not.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, by the way, and that applies to everybody who's experienced this. Okay, Nancy Dunne, what were the gifts of fanfic to you, and what is the thing that it didn't teach you, that it didn't prepare you for?
I feel like now I'm just going, what she said, I think it was Nancy that said developing character, and I think more than one person said that. Anyway, that I think is one of the great things, because I had characters that were sort of already developed because they were from a game. They were still me. I mean, I think I have a slightly different fan fiction experience because I was never brave enough to post anything I wrote. Good gracious. It went on a blog that I knew about, that maybe 1 or 2 friends knew about, but I have always been very sensitive to feedback. I mean, I know we all are, but I never put any of that out for the public to see. And it was actually, that was kind of the blessing and the curse of the fan fiction, I think, because when I started thinking, this is a lot of work that I've put into this, could I not put this into a form that would not, draw the ire of Sony Games at that point? Because I think that's who owned EverQuest at the time. I heard about lots of players who had posted things on private sites that Sony had come after and not just banned them from the game, but pursued legal action against them. So I started thinking, okay, if I'm going to do something with this, It's got to be something that is not related to EverQuest. And so I had the characters, but I didn't have the world. So again, blessing and curse, I learned about how it is to do world building, which I thought, how hard could this be? And the answer is, holy goodness, that's hard. But it's fun and it's satisfying. And when you have somebody ask you a question about one of your novels later, and you can say, well, see, now on this continent, that blah, blah, blah happens. And that's because of this magic system or whatever it is that's a teeny part of the world building, but you've done it. I think that's what it forced me to do and what it gave me good examples of how to do. I would say the same for fanfic written off of books and off of television shows and movies. But you have this successful thing, this successful product that you can, as you're writing your fanfic, kind of pick apart and go, okay, well, they made sure that they had this covered and this is explained this way and this is related to blah. And it really gives you a structure to build from. I would say you're not there. You need to take that and then hone your craft and learn more about what you need to put in to build a successful world. But it both got me started and then scared the crap out of me. Those are the things I took from fan fiction, I think, from writing it.
And what didn't it teach you? What did it not prepare you for in the paid writing world, not the real writing world? Because some fan fiction is amazing.
Still living in my hard drive.
Yeah, well, it's amazing.
Probably the extra that you have to do. Like I said, that I had the characters, but they had to be completely different characters. At their soul, some of my characters that are in my novels are still a part of me and a part of my close circle of friends that played together. There are still parts of those people that I can pick out, but I had to learn how to add enough and change enough. And sorry, I'm signing because English is getting hard because it's late in the day. I had to be able to make them their own characters, not like, for example, my main character that I played was called Jen. My main character in my novel has the same name, but she is a completely and utterly different thing. And that's one thing I'm the most proud of, I think, because she's not me. She's way not me. I mean, if she was me, well, she wouldn't be me because I wouldn't survive one day in the world that I created. But it's the extra stuff that you have to get someone to teach you to do, or you have to work at until you can figure out how to do, or you watch all the panels you can and all the YouTube videos of authors talking about their craft. It kind of drops you off into an abyss and you have to figure out how to swim, I think. Boy, I'm sounding very negative.
Well, learning how to swim is a valid point, that there is a lot that it won't teach you. And that's sort of part of the writer's journey.
Doing your own swimming and not somebody else's.
Exactly. So that's valid. Alledria, what about you? What was the greatest gift, the thing you learned from fan fiction you couldn't get anyplace else? And what was it that it did not teach you or did not prepare you for when you started writing your original fiction?
It taught me follow through, because the reality was you would get people invested in your fanfic, and then you would get nasty grams after about 6 weeks of not posting because people are like, but how does it end? How does it end? And of course that makes it so that you then have to kind of dust it off and go, okay, I have to at least finish the story.
Mm-hmm.
So that actually made me have to be able to follow a story from beginning to middle to end and finish something, because otherwise I was going to get discussion of why I didn't finish it or what the ending should have been. It's like, okay, I'll just finish it so that you guys will leave me alone.
Oh dear.
And what I did not learn from fan fiction, I think the biggest thing that I did not take away from fan fiction that I had to learn as an author of my own work was how to do descriptions properly. Because of course, like Nancy Northcott said, everybody knows certain things. If you can't do if you don't know how to describe well, you can kind of cheat. When you're doing your own work, there's nothing to cheat off of. So you have to actually do the work. So that was one of the first things what I had to learn was how to do descriptions well, was because otherwise I would have these wonderful, like almost dream-like things going on in my head, and what was coming out on the paper was mush. Mm-hmm. So I needed to learn. And of course, as Nancy Dunne said, you watch all the YouTube videos, you read the books, you learn the things that you didn't get. I mean, yes, fan fiction can give you a quick and dirty education, but it doesn't give you a breadth of education.
Okay, valid. Okay, I've got one quick question before we will be winding this up and asking you all to tell us about your most recent work and where people can find you on the web. But before we go, I presume that everybody not only here has not only written fanfic, but has also read a great deal of it, or at least a significant amount of it. So I'm going to give you all the opportunity to recommend a fanfic writer who's not in the room. I'm assuming that we all write fabulous fan fiction when we choose to write it. So I'm going to ask you to talk about somebody else. So Alledria, do you have a fanfic writer who you think people should check out, and where can they find them?
Oh gosh. What is her name? She writes she wrote it on Wattpad the last time I read it. I'm gonna go ahead and say it was a smut fic, and it was Dragon Age. But I can't remember the name of the writer. But okay. It's dealing with the bull people, and I was just like, you're ballsy for that one.
That works. Nancy Northcott?
The person who I think was the best fan fiction writer I've ever read is unfortunately deceased. And we were writing before anybody had the idea for AO3. It was just not a thing at that point. Her name was Judy Rosenbaum. Her favorite Legionnaire was Monel, and she wrote incredibly poignant stories about the effect of spending 1,000 years in the Phantom Zone. And little details like, if you spent 1,000 years in the Phantom Zone, maybe you never stop taking for granted the pressure of the ground under your feet, and the taste of food, and the texture of bread when you need it. And she was always really, really good at that. And I can't recommend anybody current because I've kind of stopped reading fan fiction anymore. But I wanted to take that opportunity to pay tribute to Judy because she never submitted her work commercially. She was not confident enough to do that. And I think it's the world's loss that she never did.
Okay. That's too bad. Nancy Dunne.
I was just thinking, it has been a long time since I've read any fanfic, but something that I think counts as fanfic, especially if that gentleman you mentioned earlier is to be believed that he's written so many books. What is it? If you have permission to write in a specific universe.
Franchise.
I'm still going to say that's fan fiction. And one of the ones that led me to really try mine was, I thought if I kept talking, his name would come to me. He wrote a lot. He created the Drow, the dark elf race, the Drow.
R.A. Salvatore.
Thank you. He wrote a couple of EverQuest franchise novels, and I read them, and I had read his other stuff. I was like, this is very interesting because this is not the same voice I heard in the other books. And it was just suddenly fascinating to me that I know this is the same. Some of the franchised work that's been written by someone that you know has written something else is always a good thing, because I think it teaches you about differences in voice. Since I write in several different genres, I don't want my urban fantasy lit RPGs to sound like my high fantasy, because who's going to believe that? So that I would say that's my recommendation to if you really want to make that hop to look into that. But I haven't read a lot lately, and honestly, what I read it, and then I'm like, wait, who wrote that? What side am I on? And I have to go back. So,
Okay, great. Shauna.
As someone who writes licensed tie-in work, I've done Alien. I'm currently doing a lot with Magic the Gathering. I did a 2-year run on Spider-Gwen for Marvel Comics. Licensed IP is not fanfic. And the main reason that it's not fanfic, apart from that you're getting paid, we joke that it's fanfic for money, is that the owner of the property, the IP holder, is involved every step of the way. So my Alien novel, we had originally discussed having an alien that had been incubated inside of an android. And we got that approved, and we had this super awesome android xenomorph hybrid, and it was going to be so much fun. And then the franchise holder changed their minds. And if you and I, even if I hired you as a developmental editor for my fanfic for some reason, which is a thing that I actually recommend, if you are a fanfic author that is really thinking strongly about moving over to paid, traditionally published work, or any sort of work where you will have that kind of editorial involvement, find someone you can pay to do a developmental edit pass on a long fic. That will cost you money, but it will give you that experience, and that will save you money in the long run. But even if I had paid you to be a developmental editor on my Aliens fanfic, if you came in at the 11th hour and said, hey, your big climactic monster fight, I no longer like the core conceit of that monster, drop it, I would tell you where to stuff the wasps. But you can't actually do that with the IP holder. That changes the relationship between the author and the work completely. And it means that on some level, a lot of this stuff is canon. My Alien novel really happened in the Alien universe, which means there's a queer YA romance canonized within the Alien universe. And that may be the best thing I've ever done. Now, since she got on the bigotry bus to Turf Town, we've all kind of tried to remove J.K. Rowling from our vocabularies, and I appreciate and respect that. But I had well over a decade of having multiple Harry Potter fics as my emotional support fanfic. And some of those authors are fantastic. They are queer. They are writing beautifully inclusive stuff. And they're not JKR, and they're not getting paid for this. And I am pretty sure every time somebody clicks on a story wherein Hermione is getting railed by Draco, JKR gets a year older. So if we read enough of these, we can age her into dust and stop having to deal with her. And on that basis, I enormously recommend Colubrina, Colubrina, Colubrina. She's on AO3 and on fanfic.net. Her first big story was The Green Girl, which is what if Hermione was sorted Slytherin? Just pointing out that is a universe that gives a lot of power to a hat. And it's very canon compliant. And then she gets increasingly less canon compliant as she goes along. Her work is beautifully written. She is the only author who has ever managed to sell me, like she put it up on sale and I on Luna, Crab, and Goyle as a functioning triad relationship. Like it genuinely worked. And it's in her story Pygmalion, which is a time travel Hermione, Tom Riddle. I want to say romance, but my mouth is refusing the word. Hard evil people banging. If you are trying to excise that universe completely because of JKR's pre-mentioned ticket on the bigotry bus to Turf Town, which I completely respect, I also really recommend Sailor Patah, P-T-A-H. Sailor Patah, whose pronouns I am not sure of, wrote 3 novel-length Welcome to Night Vale, His Dark Materials crossover fanfics, beginning with he says he is an experimental theologian and going on from there. And they are the diverse, queer-friendly, functional Night Vale that we always kind of wanted the web series to be. And those are also emotional support fanfics for me. I reread them like once a year. I'm pretty sure you could figure out my AO3 alias if you just went through Calubrina's works and looked for who's the person that is commenting on every chapter on a 1-year cycle, because that's about how long it goes between reads. And the currency with which we pay our fanfic authors is likes, kudos, and shares and comments. And as someone, we had AO3 mentioned earlier. Naomi Novik, who was asked a lot, who created AO3, is a friend of mine. And we periodically complain about the fact that when you are a fanfic author, you get that immediate feedback. If you do something horrible, if you write a chapter where you're just like picturing your readers screaming, you know they're screaming because 20 minutes later, they're screaming in your inbox. So when she wrote the 3rd Scholomance book this last year, she sent me an early draft so that I could comment on it, sent me the Scholomance. I called her about halfway through the book and just screamed expletives at her for 10 minutes and then hung up. She's like, thank you. I haven't had a good fanfic.net comment in a while.
Love it. I love it. Amy, what about you? Is there any fanfic author other than those that we're sitting around the table with that you would recommend folks read?
Well,
Or more than one.
like Nancy Northcott, I haven't read fan fiction in a long time because between my full-time job and me trying to squeeze in the original writing, I don't have as much time as I used to. But I will cheat a little bit and suggest my 2 best friends, Alexandra Christian, who has a Dr. Watson series that she writes for Falstaff Books, and S.H. Roddy, who has a Frankenstein series that she also writes for Falstaff Books. Mm-hmm. They are, I guess, technically licensed works, but both of those series are really, really, really good, and I would definitely suggest those.
Yeah. Well, they're sort of public domain, so I don't think that
but they are in the John Harkness universe. They're kind of based off of his books. So
okay, so it's not the Dr. Watson or the Mary Shelley that we have to, or the Conan Doyle and Mary Shelley we have to worry about. It's the John Harkness sitting on somebody. Yeah,
it's in his like Shadow Council series.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, we have come unfortunately close to the end of the hour, so I'm going to ask everybody to basically tell us about your most recent release and where folks can find you on the web. Amy?
I'm Amy Ravenel, and I'm a baby author here. So right now, the only series I have is the Restless Spirit series with Falstaff Books. There are 3 books in the series, and the most recent one right now is Trap Spirit. Hunted Spirit, the 4th book, should hopefully be out sometime this spring, but I don't have any further news on that yet. If you're looking for some fun, cozy horror with a little bit of romance and just some feel-good stuff along with the creepy, try my series.
Okay, and where can folks find you on the web?
AmyRavenel.com, and you can find me on Facebook under Amy Ravenel.
Okay, great. Nancy Northcott?
You can find me on the web at nancynorthcott.com, and the social medium on which I'm most active is Twitter, where I'm at Nancy Northcott. My most recent release is Warrior Mage, which is the 5th in my Light Mage Wars Paranormal Romances. That would be the shirtless guys behind me. And coming out this spring is the last book in the Boar King's Honor trilogy, probably in April, and that's historical fantasy.
Okay, great. Alledria, most recent release, where can folks find you on the web?
My most recent release is called Futureland, and it's available various places on the intranet. And you can find me online at alledriahurt.com.
Okay, great. Nancy Dunne?
You can probably hear my wolfhounds drinking in the background. They've finally been let out. My most recent release is in my fantasy series, the Arana Chronicles, and it is the 8th in that series. It's called The Temple. I have another one coming out in May, which is the 2nd in my lit RPG series, which is called Storm. And you can find me at nancyedunne.com, or I'm an independently published author, so you can find me on the evil behemoth that we all love so much, on the Zon. as well as on my website. And on social media, I'm like the other Nancy, I'm most active probably on Twitter, where I'm Nancy D_writes on all the social media. That's my handle.
Okay, great. Seanan, you get the second to the last word. What's your most recent release or releases, because I know that sometimes happens with you, and where can folks find you on the web?
So when is this panel going live?
About 2 weeks.
Okay, so my most recent release is Backpacking Through Bedlam, which will have just come out from Daw Books. It is the manyth book in the Encrypted series, and it's the second narrated by Alice Price Healy after Spelunking Through Hell. I'm very excited. It's got a cover by Lee Moyer. It looks great. They keep letting me put machetes on book covers. I don't understand. But also, we will have just shipped both Unbreakable and Apocalypse scenarios from Subterranean Press. They were delayed from last year by a printer issue. The best way to find me online is, can you spell my name? It's mostly vowels. Near as I can tell, the only other Seanan McGuires in the actual world are all sheep farmers in Ireland, and they're all my cousins. So if you manage to email them somehow, they will forward it on to me. I am still currently on Twitter, which is an increasingly unstable and uncertain proposition, but packing up and moving is so much trouble, y'all.
I know. I
don't
know.
wanna. You can always go to Instagram to see pictures of my cats or my Tumblr, where you will get the hugely entertaining, basically weekly, someone discovering that I am actually me and going, wait, you're Seanan McGuire at me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm wearing her pants. So, that's fun. Basically,
Okay.
my name, you can find me.
Thank you all for joining us here and talking about fan fiction and its relationship to your craft. And thank you out there for ConTinual, the convention that never ends.